Okay. Let's see. One second. Okay. Call to order. Welcome to the February 14th, 2019 City of Manistee Planning Commission. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please take roll.
Commissioner McBride. Commissioner Slawinski.
Here.
Commissioner Szymanski.
Here.
Commissioner Yoder. Yoder?
Oh,
Yoder.
Yoder?
Yoder.
Yoder, here.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Whitliff.
Here. Thank you.
Okay.
Approval of agenda. This time the planning commission at this time, the planning commission may approve the February 2014 agenda.
I made motion. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Slavinsky, second by Mick. Any comments or questions?
No.
Please take roll.
Commissioner Slawinski.
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski.
Yes.
Commissioner Yoder.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitloff.
Yes. Thank you. Approval of minutes. At this time, the planning commission could take action to approve the January 3rd, 2000 meeting minutes. Is there a motion? Motion by Nick and a second by Shelley. Any questions, comments on it? Please take roll.
Oh,
Commissioner Slawinski.
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski.
Yes.
Commissioner Yoder.
yes.
Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Whitliff.
Yes. Public hearings, there is none today. Public comment on agenda-related items, and I have an addition for this, and I'll read it. All comments and handouts from the speaker at the podium will go through the chair. Also, there will not be any interaction between the podium, speaker, and the audience. If these rules cannot be followed, the chair can terminate the meeting. So I'm asking for your cooperation. Thank you. It's a good thing. So, thank you for that. Special presentation, Linda Beaton. She will give a presentation on what's happening in the real estate world in the city of Manistee.
Okay,
Okay.
well, now that I've heard the instructions, I have some handouts, and I will preface that by saying, I'm not the greatest at making spreadsheets. I should have put some disclaimers and dates on this thing, but I'll walk you through it anyway.
Name and address for Kelly, too. When you get up to the podium, you gotta say your name and address.
Oh, you, okay.
Oh, you used to anyhow, unless you change it.
Thank you, okay. Linda Beaton, 256 Hughes Street. All right. Mark Whitliff had contacted me about 3 or 4 weeks ago and asked if I knew somebody or would like to do a presentation to the Planning Commission on sales of real estate throughout the city and what people, what made people want to buy here. If I could help them with that and make them understand that, what turned them off, made them not want to buy here. So I took a look at it in a number of different ways. So I've got this stapled together with commercial property sort of on the top. And so as we work through this, it's 2 pages. We're going to go from kind of not great news to really good news, if you think of it that way. So the first section is on multifamily homes. And I looked at the last 3 years of sales. You can see that there's not a lot. These would be multifamily homes, anything from 2 apartments through 5 and above apartments. So 2016, we had 5 sales and they were 2 apartments. The average number of units were 2 in 2016. In 2017, there were 13 properties sold with an average number of 2 apartments in them. In 2018, there were 10 properties sold with an average of 3 apartments in them. Anybody want to take a guess at what Ludington's numbers were? Because we're always being compared to Ludington. Now, that's not on your sheet, but I did look at those today. Anybody want to hazard a guess?
Are you asking us to
Yes.
guess about the number of?
Yeah, if
properties?
somebody just wants to hazard.
But I mean, number of properties or average number of units? within
No,
each property?
number of properties.
18.
Oh, 18. You're close, it's 14.
Oh.
And their average number of units were 2. Now, if you go across the page here, you can see there's a column there, and it doesn't line up great. It says average number of days to close. That's from when it hits our MLS and to the closing date. And for 2016, you can see it took 260 days on average. In 2017, vast improvement, 124. In 2018, it took 166 days. What's not on your sheet is Ludington, because we get compared to Ludington a lot. Took 76 days to close in 2018. So,
Question?
sure, go ahead.
Any idea where that discrepancy is coming from?
Some idea.
Care to elaborate?
I think it depends on their location. But other than that, that's all I really can tell you. You know, out of the 28 multifamily units that were sold in the 3 years of time, 20 of them were duplexes. So they seem to be popular, but they do take a long time to sell.
If you're done, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the buyers and sellers, do they happen to be like the same people that buy more? Or are they all new people that bought the 10 and 18?
There's no way for me to search the MLS and tell you that. The only one who could tell you that would be Molly Whitstone, and she would be able to elaborate even more on these kinds
Oh, I
of
see.
numbers. Commercial properties, and that would be throughout the entire city. In 2016, there were 7 properties sold. 4 of them were in the DDA. As you can see, the average number of square feet, the average days to close, if you got a sale on them,
Ooh, small.
was 525 days in 2016. In 2017, 9 properties sold, 4 of them were in the DDA. Took an average of 378 days to close. In 2018, there was only 1 property sold in the DDA, and that's the purchase that the DDA made of the American Cleaners Building. And that average number of days sold for all those properties was 323 days.
Question, in the DDA, I know we do have some buildings down there for sale.
Yeah.
What do you think that's attributed to? Why-
Well, I'm going to get to that because I've got
Okay.
some myth busters for you.
All right.
In 2018, Ludington sold 15 units, or 15 buildings, and it took them 105 days to close. So really, I consider this all commercial property. It takes a lot longer to close things, and obviously it takes a lot longer to close things, I think, if it's in the DDA. We do have a nice sale that's pending on the DDA district. It's one of the buildings on River Street, obviously, that is for around $1 million. So that's pending, so that'll help. And when you get small numbers like that, when you throw a big building in there, it drives up your average cost, you know, per sale, et cetera. So now if you go to the second page, homes. So in the city of Manistee, 2016, there were 96 homes sold. Took an average of 133 days to close. An interesting thing about selling houses is that sometimes what you start seeing is some trends. 33 of those homes were cash buyers in 2016. Average sale price was $97,600. In 2017, there were 91 homes sold, and I don't really consider that like a dip or anything, because sometimes something can be pending in 1 year and then closing in the next year and vice versa. So 91 units were sold. Average days to close went down to 99 days, and there were 29 units that sold for cash. And then last year was our blowout year. We had 130 homes that sold in the city of Manistee. And it took 91 days to close. The average sale price was $107,468. And 41% of them were cash. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. If people come in here and they buy, and by the way, 43% of all of the homes sold in the last 3 years, they were paying non-homestead taxes. So these were second homes or investment properties or whatever. But when we look at 2018, and we look at 53 homes out of 130 that were cash, think about it. Somebody comes in here, and a lot of these are principal homes. They got a lot more disposable income when they're not paying a mortgage. I mean, that goes back to economic development and stuff that we need to pay attention to. So that's a really good piece of information. Ludington. Bear in mind, Ludington has almost 2,000 people more than the city of Manistee. Ludington, and you might want to write these down, they only sold 119 homes last year. They only sold 119 homes. It took them a lot less time to close them. They closed in 48 days. For an average price of $156,971. Now you think about that. If you were to put on a realtor hat, and we get this all the time, we get complaints about our taxes are too high here. Oh my gosh, they don't want to buy downtown. They don't want to buy homes because the taxes are too high. And we get compared to Ludington a lot. But the problem is, our tax rate, our millage rate, is only 1.64 mils higher than Ludington. So on a taxable value of $100,000. And by the way, I did a little snooping around, a little trolling, and nobody's sitting on city council except for one member. You might find this interesting, Commissioner Szymanski. 6 out of the 7 city council members have taxable values of $50,000 or less. So if you're gonna look at 100,000, which seems like a huge amount at this point when you talk about it that way, but it's easy to figure out the difference. It's $164 a year. That's it. That's it. So if it's half that, it's $80 more. Per year, not per month. It's not like a huge amount. And you look at city services and you start thinking about that, it's probably worth that difference. So that's the myth buster that I wanted to share with you guys on that. Same story. Go ahead, Shelley.
Excuse me, do you know, again, Ludington, how many of those were cash purchases?
Yeah, a lot less. 36 were cash, and that's 30%.
It's been one of the things, 2 of the people that bought homes in 18 happened to be neighbors, one across the street and one next door. Both of them were retirees, sold their previous home, thus the cash payment for their home here. And I'm guessing that the rest of those 53, a preponderance of them may be in that same situation.
What we see a lot in real estate, and it's a trend that's growing, is we have a lot of, say over 50 aged men and women who are single people buying homes. And that's been, especially obviously from my viewpoint, it's interesting to see that number of women owning homes is greatly increasing. So, They like the area, people like the area, obviously. There's a little bit more of a preference to be west of 31 when people are buying homes, because they perceive
Yeah,
it as being a plus, because it's closer to things that are historic, it's closer to the beach, it's closer
right.
to walkability things that we like to do.
But, could I ask a question? With that, facts and like you have it all broke down, what we're getting then is what the lady and the gentleman said is retirees. So if we have to look at the council, then where our direction is. If what we're getting in is retirees, then shouldn't we focus on retirees?
Yeah, I don't
I
think,
mean, how can we ask for jobs if the people that are coming here are 55 years old? I mean, who's gonna put a company in here?
well, they're not all that age, but most,
Well,
but there's a good chunk of them that are.
yeah, right, well, I understand, but,
We can't track, without going back to Molly at the assessor's office, about the buyers and whether they're paying homestead or non-homestead. But we can track it in the MLS,
right,
which is kind of interesting, because 43% of the homes that were sold were non-homestead to begin with.
right.
So, and I know people that bought into the city of Manistee because their family wanted them, say, closer to the city services.
Yeah,
But then as they aged over the last few years, they want them moving downstate to where they can keep an eye on them or help them out more. So it's quite interesting to see
yeah.
that trend. Okay, let's talk about condos, because that's another good news story. In 2016, we sold 29 condos citywide. Took, unfortunately, 338 days to close. In 2017, it was 31 units. Only took 149 days to close. Last year, we sold 35 condos, and it took 192 days to close. One of those might have been mine. Yeah. For an average cost in 2018 of $244,000. Luddington last year only sold 10 condos. And it took them, this is the first time they beat us a number of days, it took them 204 days to close, so we beat them on the number of days closing. And their average sale was 227. So the residential side really looks very good. The only problem that we're having right now is that there's not a lot of active inventory. People aren't, they're not motivated to list. So if we don't get a lot of listings, the numbers are gonna be down, and that's gonna be reflected then next year when we do an analysis like this.
Yeah.
But hopefully that'll switch around. Now, what's even gonna be more interesting is, and I like Luddington, my husband works there. I like Luddington because they are close to us, they offer a lot of things, and there's a lot of things we can emulate from them. I think they can emulate things from us as well. But here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna build a new high school, and they're gonna have to pass a bond issue for that. And there's probably gonna be some increase in their taxes, so they might actually overcome our tax rate at that point. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm kind of jealous because their population is growing with younger people. But it's something I think we need to work on to try to get families here. The housing crunch has been really bad. It's hurt Luddington more because they have more people and they're looking for more housing. And a lot of them move up here to work down in Luddington.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's-
hoping not too many of them are affected by the job closings that are gonna happen here in Luddington.
Linda, on the condos.
Yep.
We sold 35 units in 2018 and 29, 31, and 35. Where are these units in the city?
They're all over. They're all over. Last year, we did really well in Lighthouse Landing, and that had been lagging behind for a little while, the last couple of years prior to that. So for some reason, it's really funny. Lighthouse Landing got hot. So that was good.
Now, Joslyn Cove, they're just, I think, probably finishing their next 4 units.
Yeah.
Is there anything there?
Well, there've been some delays, which has been unfortunate because they had some buyers that pre-bought. So, we're hoping that all those deals hold together, of the
So
ones
they're-
that I'm
Are they
aware of.
planning on moving forward with the other foundations?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're planning on finishing out units that are on those existing foundations, I know
Okay,
that,
Yeah.
so.
But the pads that are there that they haven't started construction, we don't know anything about that?
Well, they can't lay any cement at this time of year anyway.
I'm sorry, but weren't there a couple pads north of the existing?
Yes, and
Buildings
they
there?
plan on finishing those.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
They, if I can say, they must finish those. We have a development agreement between the County Brownfield Authority and Johnson Cove. There's a time frame that they have to complete those condos within to meet the obligations to be able to be refunded for their eligible costs that were born out of the Brownfield plan.
Ms. Beaton, when I look at the average days of closing, would you venture a guess of where the majority of those delays are? Is it in the financing? Or is there something
A lot
that
of
the
times it
city is involved with that we could make amends? That we could adjust?
a lot of
and
times
adapt?
it is in the financing, in the fact that, you know, they'll get an assessor in there, and his numbers might not be up to what we think the market value is, and that may be an issue of dispute. There may be some repairs that need to be made on some of the housing, which delays it. But I would think in the case, I would be concerned, I am concerned, I'm on city council, I am concerned about how long it takes to sell something in the DDA district. And a lot of that does have to do, because that's one of the complaints that I've heard, is that it takes too long to get through the process. And it just slows everything down, and it's too stressful. Because you've got the Historic Commission to go through, you've got, they get a lot of, some people have complained that they've almost got too much attention from the DDA. You know, they're trying to buy something, and they're also, you know, getting too much information thrown at them at the same time. We need to somehow streamline that process. I don't know how to work that out. But that's what people have told me. Also, because we have a lot of historic buildings, you can imagine that there's a lot of work that needs to be done inside of them. So when they go through their due diligence and they're you know, doing an inspection on the buildings, sometimes they're walking away from the deals because it's too costly to repair. They're not gonna get a return on their investment that they'd like to see,
Oh, yeah,
so.
that's true.
But, hey, that whole thing about the taxes drives me nuts, because we're so close. So if there's anything else I can help you with.
Couple questions, anyway. When you as a realtor, when you have your realtor hat on, and you have people coming into town looking at our downtown or houses, and they don't choose Manistee, and this could help us too, what's the reasoning? If they share that with you,
I mean,
or your
I-
office?
I really don't sell a lot of commercial property, but I deal with lots of realtors within my office who sell commercial property. I've only sold one on River Street, and that was to the people who want to open the music vault. So that's my only, you know, commercial sale that I've made. And actually, I can share this with you. They were really upset because they tried to buy the North Channel Outlet building, and they were in a bidding war, and they lost. They lost not because they didn't bid enough, but because they wanted to have financing. They wanted to, you know, they wanted to borrow money from a bank to do it. But the people who had bought that property had cash, and that was a stronger deal. So they went with that.
So, I don't wanna come to Manistee because of their taxes, or the city services, or shopping, or, you know, any of that. Do they share that with you?
They have, but I tell you what, if they're gonna be upset about taxes, they're gonna move to the townships, because they'll go, no, I just can't handle city taxes.
yeah,
They're more likely to go, I wanna be out in the townships. And if they want high-speed internet, they're gonna have to be really careful about where they buy, at this point, because we do not have high-speed internet throughout the county, which is
No,
something that's a stumbling block for a lot of people right now.
EarthNet said on TV today, if somebody tells me that, I can tell them no, because you can get EarthNet anyplace.
Huh, well, I don't know what that is, so,
Yeah, it's a township type satellite.
Satellite, it's a satellite.
maybe it will solve the problem, I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah, they said you could get it anyplace.
And my last question is, you said about Ludington bringing in families, younger families, and, do you see that here? I mean, do you know how many younger families we brought in?
There's no way I can tell you, there's no way I would know that, or any broker. It was, the schools would have a good idea if they had school-aged children. I mean, obviously, their trend has been a lower and lower population of.
You mentioned earlier about letting, perhaps drawing more young people. And any thoughts about what's drawing them there as opposed to here? Is it strictly jobs?
Well, it could be jobs, because just as a, again, kind of poking around, I went on Michigan Works, and the number of jobs available in the Ludington area are like 4 to 1 at least to the Manistee area. So that's probably part of it. They also try to portray themselves as a family-friendly town. And that's evident in in Google search as far as what are things to do for children. There's a website called Tripmaster, you're probably familiar with it. Tripmaster is kind of like a CAN program, and you have these different categories you can select that match up with your municipality. Ludington, if you go for the city of Ludington, there's 11 points of interest that they have out there for kids. If you go to the city of Manistee, it's 0.
Yeah,
So, that, I don't know. It's just something I think we could probably tighten up and change our image a little bit. And I think that comes with image management, and that falls under marketing.
What website was that again, Linda?
Pardon me?
What site was that?
Tripmaster.
Okay.
Yeah,
And actually,
any of them, there's several of them, Mark.
yeah,
They rate-
I think it would be good if we just even put something that's outside the city for kids to do. Would be good to have something on there, and making things a little bit more dog-friendly. But the irony of it is,
Yeah,
Ludington advertises on the internet they're dog-friendly, but then when I actually looked at the ordinances, I had to do that today, and it was like, wow, we're actually a little bit more dog-friendly than they are. So I thought that was kind of.
That's all in the wording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, and the way that they market themselves.
right.
See, the summertime a lot, at least one business per block has a water dish for dogs outside
Here.
in Ludington.
In Ludington, yeah, they do something.
At least one business every block's got a
Yeah,
dog
we have,
food.
I think we have that too. We have, Fillmore Goodies, I think,
Outback, I think they,
the Outpost.
Yeah.
Outpost.
I had one comment from a broker that was, kind of stunned me. He said what he's heard from people that he'd been working with for prospective business opportunities. They have said, although summer business is strong, so is the shortage and willing workforce. Many are finding it difficult to find employees in their current cities, which is why they're looking here, and feel, unfortunately, there would be additional challenge to fill employer needs in the city of Manistee. So, that's one comment. I mean, there could be more people that feel like that, or just a handful. But we have so few sales, it's really hard to tell you exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
The residential's good.
Now, didn't we have a workshop or relationship with the college though, Marco, where they were gonna work with the communities
They
to
really-
train the people that the employers need? So when the kids get out of, like the prison, I mean, a guard, you can go to prison, find a job.
Okay.
But I thought we had some sort of a relationship where
I
they were.
think they're very aware of that. I think they're aware of that. It's just getting more of them out there, and
Oh.
getting that message across that we're addressing the problem.
Yeah, they have taken over the woodworking, metalworking, shop welding
Yeah.
classes now that the high schools go to around here,
Yeah,
so.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing we can do about that, yeah.
Linda, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good.
New business, election of officers, a vice chair.
Sure.
Now, is this an appointment or is this an election?
What are you doing?
Vice
The,
chair,
bylaws-
Maureen resigned.
Call it an election.
Maureen,
So
It would be an election.
Yes.
it says election in the bylaws.
I didn't tell you that.
Huh,
Maureen's not on the board anymore?
She resigned
Last week,
to-
last couple
Last-
weeks.
last
Two
meeting.
months.
She's continuing her education, it sounds like, and she, time constraints.
well, isn't she in charge of the citizen, or senior citizens too?
Right.
I think she's,
Yeah, she's the president of the senior center.
yeah, senior center,
Council on Aging.
yeah, or council, whatever. Yeah, she's got her plate full.
I
And
applaud her for going back and getting her continuing education, so.
Her master's degree, actually.
And I asked her back when she frees up, so she said maybe, gave a definite maybe, so.
So she and Marlene traded.
All right,
So this is an appointment or an election?
Well, it's similar to how every year you guys do an election amongst yourself.
Okay,
Who's gonna be the chair, who's gonna be the vice chair, who's gonna be the treasurer. So now someone needs to nominate
okay.
someone else and second, and then you do a vote.
All right. Asking for nominations for vice chair.
Everyone's
Nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Bob.
Any other
second.
nominations for vice chair? Huh? Please take roll. The nominee is Bob Slavinsky.
Commissioner Szymanski?
Yes. Easy for you to say.
I know it's not. Commissioner Yoder,
yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Slawinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitliff.
Yes. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Bob.
Big shoes and a hefty payday.
Double my pay, all right.
There you go, happy Valentine's
And a
Day.
holiday bonus.
Oh,
That's
I didn't
special.
know that. The bylaw review.
Yeah, beat 'em all, are you?
Now, do you take care of that? Staff, the bylaw review?
I'm sorry?
Do you take care of the bylaw review?
That's the same as,
I'm looking for the bylaws in the packet.
Yeah, it was in
uh-huh.
It's
It was in the packet that you
Thank
sent.
you.
Yeah.
There must be right here. So, every year, typically you look at this in January. You think about the bylaws, and if you have changes, corrections, or whatever, you make them, and if you don't, then they stand as they are.
Yeah.
So if you like the way they are, or if you have any comments, this is when we would take care of it. Or otherwise, just make a motion to
Change it.
keep them as they are and take a roll call vote and be done.
Any changes,
I make,
additions?
I make a motion we accept as written.
Okay. Second? Motion by Mike Szymanski, second by Bob Slavinsky. Any questions? We're good? Please take roll.
Uh-huh.
Commissioner Slawinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski, Commissioner Yoder,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitliff.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Annual subcommittee appointments, executive committee, site plan review, subdivision committee, zoning board of appeals, commissioner contact information
Oh,
update.
no, that's another item.
Okay,
So it's just those three committees.
all right,
And I provided just a little memo just to remind you of what each one of those committees do. And then if you don't recall what committee you were assigned to last year, we can go over that. Because I don't know how often they met
Depending on needed.
Yeah, so,
You could review those, Tim?
oh,
Do you have those?
you know what? I do not, I apologize. I have an empty form so you guys can sign up for them. But I do recall that the executive committee was made up of the officers. So we had the chair, the vice chair,
Secretary.
And the secretary?
and the secretary, so that's easy.
Yep.
The site plan review and subdivision committee, I think had, and when we were talking about this, Mark, you were on it, Maureen was on it, and,
Roger.
I
and
think I-
Roger, yeah. And then zoning board of appeals, I don't think I keyed in on who was on the zoning board of appeals, so,
Ray was our, you mean one person
right.
liaison, that was Ray.
It was her, yeah, that's right, it was Maureen, yep.
So
Marlene, I think Marlene took that last year. She went to zoning board of appeals.
she could
Okay.
have,
Yeah.
so it's pretty straightforward.
Right, so the executive committee's pretty easy. Now we have a chair, we have a vice chair, secretary.
Yeah.
The site plan review subdivision committee.
Let Bob fill in for Maureen and you got that right.
All right, so it's Mark and Bob then?
You and I and the young lady. What's her name? I'm sorry.
Shelley.
Shelley, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Shelley.
So Roger, Rochelle,
And Bob,
and Bob, okay.
he's the vice chair.
So that's for the site plan review subdivision committee.
Yeah.
And then zoning board of appeals would be Marlene again?
Maureen,
I believe she
Okay.
was on it last year, so,
she was, yeah, unless something happens and she can't.
yeah. Then we'll cross that bridge
Huh.
if she can't do it. We'll cross that
Okay.
bridge, so, since she's not here.
So for
Marlena's right.
So then to tidy that up, just a quick motion that says, as we just discussed,
Okay?
those folks are appointed to the committees.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second
Okay.
it.
There you go.
Okay.
By
So do we
Shelley,
need a recap
Nope.
of who's on what?
Nope, I will recap it for you if you'd like to.
Please,
The executive committee, Mark and Bob, and the site plan review subdivision committee, Roger, Rochelle, do you like Shelley, is that, okay. Shelley and Bob, and the zoning board of appeals,
Marlene.
Marlene.
now on the executive committee, Marlene's on it because she's the secretary.
Oh, I'm sorry, she's the secretary, yes.
Vice chair, chair.
So it was good that I recapped.
Okay.
Okay,
All right?
okay, roll
Now, a
call.
motion by Shelley, a second by Bob. And roll, take a roll, please.
To approve all these changes.
Just on the,
Commissioner Slawinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski,
Yes.
Commissioner Yoder,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitlock.
yes. And then the commissioner contact information update.
So, we just made a worksheet and we filled it out the best we could. And how about just as the meeting commences, you can just kind of check off your information if something's wrong. Just, correct it, otherwise just pass it on down and then we'll have an updated list.
Oh, yeah, okay,
that
address and,
okay?
yeah, address and, yeah, okay. Yeah, address and your phone number is all you're gonna check, right?
Right.
You don't want
Well,
emails or anything?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we
Emails.
would like it
If you
if you
have
would
an
check your
email.
Like
email.
emails, yeah.
You want to put your email in there?
Well, go ahead and then,
Okay.
at the end.
And you have my email, don't you?
And now we have the correct email. That's one of the reasons why this is important to be doing.
Yes, it's very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Underscore instead of a dot.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Because I came to the meeting last month and nobody else was here.
Oh, Roger.
Jeez.
Not last week.
But then I went back and looked and you did send an email at noon.
Yeah,
Let them get on the computer.
yeah. It's hard when you don't automatically check email or you're not living and breathing your email or social media or something.
That lives and breathes my email.
Yeah, I
That
know.
was the meeting,
Write that down and I'll
Roger.
call you.
You should have got that.
Roger,
Hello,
that was the meeting last Thursday.
yeah, last Thursday.
I left a voicemail for you.
Oh, you did too?
Yeah.
On a telephone?
There was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Geez, I
It's
didn't
okay.
catch that
I
one.
called too.
Huh.
Well, there, I apologize there, everybody was
Sorry,
calling,
I
I didn't know
called
nothing
too.
about it.
That's what I call.
That's how it is when you get retired, Tam, you'll see.
Is it? Oh, yeah, well, you know, I don't know if I'll mind that so much. That's okay.
No, I didn't mind it.
You're very brave to get out there in the weather, though, that's for sure.
Well, it was kinda shitty, but
I sent that text. He was one of the-
at least I got to get the paper.
Yeah, I remember you saying.
Within the
Okay.
big package,
Oh, you
we
mean
got
today?
with today's stuff.
Oh, excuse me.
What are we looking for? Go look again.
We all got a copy of that in today's packet. We
Let's
didn't do that yet.
Commission members,
Thank you.
We'll move along.
I don't think
Do you have an extra copy of that?
Of the contact?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a couple extras. Did you,
Can't find it in my stuff.
Bob and I didn't get copies.
well, no, I'm so sorry. I'm not, I was going to take and revise it,
Oh, okay.
and then we'd be happy to share everybody's revised contact. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would.
Okay, because I see that there are a couple corrections on it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get to.
Old business, there's no old business today.
No.
Public comments and communication. I reviewed the prior on, all comments and handouts. I don't think I have to go through that again, do I?
No,
No, okay. Public comments and communications, any letters or anything?
No.
No, okay. Any comments from the public?
At a PS. I did briefly, you know, running in and out of City Hall, you run into people. I ran into Molly a few days ago, and I did talk to her about what I was doing. Of course, the way they run their analysis is a completely different basis than what I ran for you guys. But she said the number that I see as solds, and for residential and for the condos might be, is gonna be lower than what she's gonna probably reflect if she were to do it on a calendar year basis, because a lot of properties just become uncapped, you know, because they're transferred to private sale or something like that. So it's important to remember that I'm just giving you what I can get off our MLS. So there's probably more out there that make the numbers better.
Oh.
So I think that's all good, but I thought I'd just let you know that.
what is this MRI,
MLS, the
Manistee
multiple listing service.
multiple listing?
And
Okay.
the one that we belong to, and most of the properties that are advertised.
Yeah.
You know, it has Manistee, Mason County, and Oceana County. That's the board of realtors that I belong to. And that's where and just about everybody in town who's a realtor also puts their listings in that MLS. Occasionally, you'll get an out-of-state person who'll do it, you know, and it'll be in their MLS, but we'll see it anyway, because everything goes to Realtor.com now and Zillow, no matter who it is. So, but the statistical stuff and like, whether it's a cash sale or not, would only come off of our MLS. That I can't grab that off of anything else.
All right.
Thank you. Staff reports, this time I'm sorry, Roger.
Roger Zelinski, 529 First Street. Thank you, Ms. Mead. I just want to thank everybody for all the work that they do here. It's very important, and I believe we're in a unique situation right now where a lot of positive things can happen in Manistee. They're going to be quick. We need to take advantage of it. We need to get on board and think positively and get those things done. I really do appreciate your cooperation and all the hard work you do, and let's move forward and let's see things happen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Okay, any other comments? No? Okay.
No, when
Staff
you're ready.
reports, at this time, the chair may ask the staff for their report. Looks like the first one is the Joe Hollander housing project. Anticipated PUD.
So we have 4 items to talk about, and there's no action about them, but we really felt that you should know about some of these things that we're dealing with that are gonna come your way eventually. And at the time that the agenda was prepared, we knew that the Hollander project was coming our way, but since the time that you received your agenda, they actually did submit their application and their site plan, and we've actually gone through one site plan review. So my correspondence was to let you know it was coming, be prepared, but now I laid on your table the actual site plan, and then the preliminary reviews for the site plan, the zoning review, the fire, police, engineering, and DPW. You'll note that it's not in a really pretty format because you'll also have noticed the timeline that was included in your packet for this project. We're trying to help them meet an April 1st deadline. So, you know, Rob and I sat there and we counted backwards. We planned backwards to try to figure out when they needed to submit. We tried to put in there 2 rounds of reviews before it even came in front of you guys formally, so that it was as clean of a site plan and they had as many opportunities to correct some of the first blush mistakes that always occur. So that's what you have in front of you, that first blush kind of big glaring mistakes that we could find. By the time it comes to you next time, probably far less comments, a much more tight application, and then that's when you'll start, you know, your review. And you'll have had those site plans, you know, a week before, so you can review them and ask your questions, and use the zoning ordinance, obviously, to guide your thinking about the PUD, because you all remember a PUD, a planned unit development, doesn't necessarily have to conform to the zoning. You guys have a lot of latitude, and using your training as planners to do the review and make comments and work with the developer to make the project happen. But, so, you know, we as a planning staff, or zoning staff, met the the May 12th deadline to get all the reviews in.
12th,
I'm sorry, what did I say?
May. I just want to change for the record, February.
February 12th deadline. The next time they will submit will be February 22nd. Before that, we're going to set the public hearing date. You know, we're trying to be really efficient. Hopefully, they're going to make all these deadlines. We will make sure we meet ours, though. And I don't know if you guys would like to go through it, if you'd like to ask any questions. You were just thrown it tonight, so I don't know how much you want to talk about it.
This isn't even proper.
No.
This is just a first draft.
It is I call it a preliminary site plan. It's just a total first blush. A lot of it could change.
Right, well, but no.
So,
In your experience, were there any showstoppers? Was there anything in their plan that we would have to be concerned with at this time?
so from a zoning perspective, so the only review I did was to benchmark it off of the zoning ordinance, and we have a checklist of things that need to be on the plan. That's the only review that I did. Didn't dive into a true planning review. But none of the zoning ordinance items I felt were a very big deal. A lot of them can be, and I've already had a conference call with them, so I've gone over all the items. They are notes on the plan, they're tweaks here, they're recalculations. None of them were really huge, but I cannot speak for the engineering review or the DPW review. Those might have some significant issues. I do think that the fire review, I did notice a quick note that looked a little concerning. So as you go through it, I think but from a zoning ordinance perspective, nothing glaring.
Okay. That won't be brought up above, with the committee prior to it, will you? You'll bring that plan to the whole commission?
To whole commission.
Okay.
Right.
Now, they're not having 4-level units in this, are they?
One building is 4
One
level.
building.
Yeah.
One building? Okay.
But we already, like I said, 2 blocks away, you already have a 7-story. So it's not
Yeah.
like this would be the one that breaks.
Right.
And they are, as
Bank.
you mentioned, we mentioned earlier, they are looking at obtaining, they just missed the deadline for the grant, for the fire truck, but they are looking at getting a fire truck that would be adequate to take care
Are
of
they
this.
going with 100? Okay.
I think they currently got like a 70-footer right now.
Yep.
7?
So, you know, this is kind of interesting because this is a really big project, and when we talk about tightening up the development process, you know, this is really where it could either take a really long time and a lot of really important deadlines are missed, or not. And so we're committed to making sure that we run a very lean but very thorough review, and we get them through the development process the best that we can. They've got to be a partner to that too.
Right.
And so far, they've been great.
Now, in public comment, how much of this, do they get electronic versions of site plans as well when you send this out to the local residents?
So that was not sent out to anybody but you folks because it's so preliminary. But when we get the next one, it will go out to residents, and we can send it digitally, no problem.
Well, it'll go on the website.
The website,
And
yeah.
then the public hearing notice will have the web address, and a link address for them, and then they can obtain it right off the
And
website.
when is the public hearing expected now?
Well, so we were looking at,
March 12th?
so we're looking at February. No, that's when it will be posted. Let's see,
So
March 7th.
March 7th.
7th.
March 7th, yeah.
So your next
Meeting,
meeting.
right.
That is if they get
Get back to us by
things in by the time that we've laid out, so.
Now, do you have a deadline like we did with Denise? I mean, nothing comes in, like our Thursday meeting, nothing comes in on Tuesday that she tried to put on the meeting. So, you know, if you didn't have enough lead time, or like, get this tonight and say, let's vote on it, well.
I wouldn't do that to you.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, no, I don't, I mean, if you, right, tonight we put it on the table because you're not taking action.
Right.
It doesn't have any, nothing's happening. You can take it home and look at it and,
Yeah.
the only thing I worry about is that it might cause confusion because I think the next one's gonna look different. As far as maybe some of the parking and landscaping.
Base it off to start with anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Next item?
So the next item is regarding the Tabernacle Church. You'll recall that you approved that site plan last year. And I think we might have talked a little bit about this. They have a parking lot. They want to use a pervious surface. And the pervious surface, so they want to have a surface that the rain, will fall on it, absorb into the ground. The ordinance allows for that. The type they want to use is grass pavers. So if you can envision like a honeycomb kind of lattice structure on top of a substrate and then grass growing through it is what they're looking to do. And we've been working with them on that concept. So Jeff McCullough from DPW has been thinking about it, and we've talked to Sean Middleton, the engineer, so that, he can think about it. It's a large surface for that type of structure. The zoning ordinance allows for pervious surfaces, but then it goes on to talk about painting the stripes for the parking stalls. So that doesn't really make sense. You can't really paint on grass. So to allow them to do that, we probably have to look at revising the zoning ordinance language to remove that painting, but then you're probably going to want to figure out some other method to help organize the cars as they're parked on the site. So we have to think that through. So yes, and yes.
How does that work with snow plowing with grass?
And I think that is a great question that you need to hold on to and keep thinking of questions like that. Rob actually brought that up. I'm concerned about compactness and how the grass holds up over time. Jeff McCullough is concerned about particles going into the water and eventually ending up in the stormwater sewer system. So there are going to maybe be other questions to talk about, but they want to do this, and unless they drop this, we'll probably bring it to you for you guys to decide what you want to do, how do you want to move forward. Yes?
Do you know if part of the reason they want to do this is so that they can save the big tree in the middle of that parking lot?
No, that is not the reason.
Okay.
Because it's going to, previous discussions, it's going to be removed.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because
Yeah.
we're talking about trying to save that tree, and I was wondering, is Was this something that came up as a result of trying to save that?
No,
It's,
no.
money saving.
I do not know what their motivation is, but I do know that their church in Buckley, isn't it Buckley? Yeah, has this type of parking lot, and they really like it. I don't think it's cheaper, so I don't think it's really necessarily cost savings, but they like it. And maybe they're feeling it's good steward of the environment.
Green, you know, they're in the green thing.
Right. The other issue is that they want to begin using their church for services sooner rather than later. So without an improved parking lot, I and George Saylor and Thad and Jeff McCullough, we cannot figure out how to allow them to do that. There's nothing in the ordinance that allows someone to use a building before the improvements that are part of their special land use permit. So that is unfortunate. We've come up with a couple of different solutions, like utilizing other parking areas and then having a bus to bring them to service, maybe like using the school's parking lot.
Shop and Save would be a lot closer for them.
Okay, or Shop and Save, some other method like that. We are meeting with them next week to go over all of these issues, but these are some issues that have to be worked out, so.
Can't just amend it, amend the particular issue where they can park there for this particular project?
So you could amend the special land use permit.
Yeah, that's right.
And so to do that, I think that you would need to convene the site plan review committee.
Okay.
So when I'm trying to understand your process, and I think that's one of the ways it could happen. We did talk about that.
I mean,
So when we meet next week, they're gonna wanna know the quickest way to get from A to B. And I think the site plan review committee to amend the special land use permit might be to phase the parking, to create, so that might be something to think about. It is interesting, the substrate that they're gonna use for the parking, that the honeycomb lattice kind of structure sits on, is the same material that they're gonna use, that you would use to put asphalt over.
Like
So-
the Meyer parking lot.
So-
Over half the Meyer parking lot is pervious asphalt.
Yeah, so they're not using pervious asphalt.
It's the same alignment on there.
Oh, okay.
It is the same, so maybe Jeff can find out what kind of data is permeating through that to compare what would go under this other stuff.
That's a thought.
Google it.
Because to get that pervious asphalt, they've got to have the same,
what it's good for.
So I don't know, I don't know if that's, I don't know how, I don't think we're trying to figure out rates of infiltration of water. I don't think that that's really what we're trying to figure out. What we're trying to figure out is how to allow them to use their building before the parking lot is improved upon. And one of the thoughts that we had was to allow them to put that initial substrate down, park on it, and maybe park on parts of it while they're growing grass on other parts, and then kind of phase it over time. But this is really something that convening the site plan review committee could talk about and figure out.
do they got any ideas what their congregation size is right now?
I do not know that. I didn't review.
Something to take into account to see how we want to maybe phase in their parking lot area.
Yeah.
They're using the armory right now, and I would say that's at least 2/3 full when they're there on Sundays.
No, just a couple of comments, because I've worked with this type of paving.
Oh.
They don't have to, they're designed where the pavers themselves are different colors so that you can delineate the parking spaces when they're created. So they
Oh.
need to talk to their designer, because the ones that I've seen, they're delineated. They're not obvious, it's not like white and black, but they have like tan and then dark brown. So they have dark brown striping, and they just delineate the color of the pavers as they make them, and that's how they.
Doing is seeing like, on the football games where you're seeing the different colors of the grass every 5 yards. It's the same.
Well, but they do it they literally create lines, but they use the pavers, just
Yep.
like if you were
Yep.
doing your patio.
Sure.
And you wanted to make some designs, you make the same things. So I think we could meet, the idea of the striping, I think is a moot point, because if you just basically say that they are going to delineate the parking spaces with the pavers,
That takes care of it.
then.
Oh, that's a great
then it
idea.
It meets the criteria. Also, the idea of the growing grass is a secondary principle. After they put those pavers down, they're gonna run dirt over the top, but it doesn't even have to. I mean, it's almost a natural process. And then they're gonna seed. So having grass on it before they park on it is a moot point. So, it isn't the way it works. As soon as those pavers are down and they're set, just like you would your pavers in your yard when you lay them out with sand and they lock in place, you're ready. And then the way that the layers are designed, that underlayment is what's supposed to catch all of the things like oil and a dripping radiator and all those environmental issues from soaking into the ground. Like I said, Europe has been using those as a preference for parking for 30 years maybe.
Away from the asphalt.
The asphalt and all the problems that you have with runoff, where then you really do have, you have chemicals and things running off into basins and causing real pollution.
That might be something we look at over the overall picture then.
Yeah.
For
it's-
future businesses, I mean,
But you may want to, like I said, just have them check and see if they can identify, because the point was that they would be able to delineate parking
Right,
places.
right.
And I think they can do that with changing the color of the pavers.
Well, I gotta tell you, that's great to hear.
Has to be stripes.
The stripes is just because that's what we think of,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I
Right.
think they can meet that,
Sure.
and then hopefully some of this becomes a moot point.
Well, Sean, or a Spicer Group is their engineer.
Okay.
So I will pass that on because we've met with them at least 4 or 5 times now, and nobody's ever talked about that. So, because you're right, that would solve
And
the problem. Right
Like I
there.
said, the large parking lots that I've seen in Europe,
Yeah.
they have parking spaces. I mean, you know
Yeah.
where you're supposed to park, where the lines.
They must, so in Buckley, what they do is they have an attendant and so that's how they were kind of wanting to solve the problem. But to meet the standards of the ordinance without having to amend it, which would add a lot of time onto their process, I think what you're saying is perfect.
And-
Perfect
and
solution.
There's more than one color of those pavers.
Yeah.
They can
No.
make all kinds of designs for each parking spot.
Mike, do you have any examples of that? Do you have any pictures of?
Boy, I
Your
can,
past?
I can look to find one, but, like I said, it's just very common.
And you saw that in Europe?
In Europe, yeah.
I'll talk to Sean Milton about it.
Just
Yeah, I
like
mean, he
said,
should
just
be
use it
able to
like you would,
find stuff.
Use those pavers at your home, you would
Yeah,
just use color to delineate.
perfect.
Google it, it'll
Yeah,
show you.
yeah, I'll Google it.
Okay. And this is more of a French drain then system, right?
Yeah, the previous approved drainage plan would no longer be needed.
Right.
The detention basin, and they do have, they didn't call it a French drain, but they did have the areas, the strips where it would, but they didn't feel that they would even need those, so.
Okay.
So we may not be talking about this again, because those are some really good suggestions.
It'd be good for them. Now, one second, Tamara.
Oh, yeah.
I think Mayor Zelinski wanted to say, you're all set? Okay.
All right.
All right, the next. The next one, the Olga Street vacation, an oldie but goodie, so.
Yeah, an oldie but goodie. I'm surprised no one's here, although I invited them all to come, but I did notify them that there was going to be no action taken on this. In my letter to you, my memo, it is long, but what I wanted to show you was the amount of contact, amount of information that we've been giving these folks to try to help them solve the problem. And I have met with Don twice. I've met with Gary twice. And they understand that to meet the requirements of your motion, what they need now is to produce that one letter signed by all of them that does 2 things, tells you that they are all on the same page in agreement, and 2, how the land is going to be kind of divvied up and who's going to get what. But Don is happy,
Right?
Gary seems to be happy, and the tribe seems to be happy. But they did not produce a letter for me yet.
If you look at
Okay.
the surveys from Spicer, it's showing the areas that they want for each of those groups to get right in the surveys.
Right, it's just splitting it half and half, 33 feet on each side.
So I'm just meeting the requirement of your motion, though.
So can we reach,
Surveys nailed everything that we're looking for.
So are,
So Don brought that in just because he's trying to understand, and he brought that, and I just photocopied it so you guys could see that. But I am sure, I think they all thought Caitlin, I think from the tribe, was going to write a letter, and I told them at that point it wasn't going to be in front of you because we had already put out the agenda. So hopefully the March 7th.
so can we reach back out to Mr. Neeson and Caitlin with the tribe? And, you know, now that we have a letter from Mr. Pachesny saying that he's
Oh.
good to go.
Well, I have told all of them, yeah,
Right, right.
absolutely.
Reach back out to him again and say, okay, let's reinforce this
Them saying they're-
so we can get this done.
Is this the division?
Sure. Pardon?
Is this the division that they decided on? It was in our packet.
Well, so this was, I just put in the former application just so you saw, you know, to remind you of what it is, but yeah. I can definitely contact them again, since the last time I spoke to them.
Yeah, let's try and close the loop on this and then,
no more surprises.
we're done.
Yeah.
Bob, you had brought up descriptions.
They're
They got them.
And so
On the
that's
surveys that
all
we've got here,
Okay, that's
descriptions
the
are on there on the now that we've got copies of all the surveys.
Yeah.
All the descriptions for what would be sent over is on there.
Okay.
And this kind of is the,
So you need a letter that all three of them are in agreement.
You guys asked for that in your motion.
Oh, we gotta ask for it in the motion?
No, you already did at the last
We
meeting.
did last meeting, Roger.
Oh,
Last
okay.
meeting.
Yeah.
but that was,
We didn't get it yet, though.
No, we haven't gotten it yet.
well, and that's because I think Mr. Pachinsky was the holdout. And now that we got his, everyone else was good to go with this. Remember, he was the one that stood up at the last minute.
Well, and he's met with them since he wrote that letter to you. He's met with them. Everybody has talked. They all know that they're all on the same page and they're all happy.
Okay.
But they just haven't produced that letter for you guys.
Okay.
So they see, I think they think it's all taken care of. They're just trying to meet your motion, which asked for a letter. And, but I can say we had our meeting and they just looking for that letter and really hoping it can come by the next meeting.
Survey stuff they provided now, that covers a lot of stuff the state may come look for.
Right.
Because you're dealing with a subdivision plat, which is regulated by the state of Michigan.
So the next item, there was an amendment for a handout that we received,
Okay?
the small wireless communication facility.
Yeah.
Yes, so, as we had brought up, you know, previous few meetings, there's several zoning ordinance amendments, that will need to be brought forward to, have the planning commission review and ultimately, hold public hearings, and then have, city council adopt those amendments should they so desire. A few of them are, you know, items that staff has found in the ordinance and so forth that we'll be, again, working through. But this one in particular, the wireless communication facilities, small wireless communication facilities, stems from legislation that was passed by the state legislature. I'm gonna say it was about this time last year, maybe March of 2018. And basically what it is wireless communication facilities, the ones that we're familiar with, like the 150-foot towers, are zoned and regulated rather strictly, as they should be, because you're dealing with high towers that could pose a public risk if they were to fall. But what has occurred is in a lot of more urbanized areas, communication companies are turning to what's called small cell wireless facilities. And these are just receivers that are attached to typically existing utility poles. And they place a lot of them within urbanized areas so that they can create a web network that covers and provides very strong service in urban areas. And what they have run into is issues with localized zoning, only zoning for wireless communication facilities and defining those communication facilities as 150-foot towers. And so specifically, when you look at the city of Manistee's zoning ordinance, a wireless communication facility is defined as, you know, wireless communication, antennas, receivers, da-da-da-da-da, but anything greater than 35 feet in height. And so when the state legislature looked at small cell wireless, they are looking at streamlining the process for these utility companies or these communication companies to be able to install these in local units of government within public right-of-ways. And they now define them as, I mean, obviously small cell antennas, receivers, that type of thing, but it comes down to being placed on utility poles that are no taller than 40 feet in height, and the communication antennas cannot extend any further than 5 feet above the top of those poles, so a total of 45 feet. They also mandate that it needs to be a permitted use within a public right-of-way. Whereas like in the current city ordinance, all wireless communication facilities are a special land use in the districts they're allowed in. They're only allowed within certain districts. These small cell wireless facilities need to be allowed as a permitted use in every district within the right-of-way. And we're rather limited on how we can regulate them. There are a few things in here that look at curb cuts, distance from curb, distance from existing infrastructure and so forth, so that they're not piling this into locations. It's trying to place them, if it's in a residential area, in line with the lot line, so that these facilities would not be right in front of someone's home. They would fall between lots. And so I had met with Thad and George Saylor about a month ago, a few weeks ago, and they had asked me to start looking at this, so I began doing some research and educating myself on the legislation and what it entailed and what they were trying to do. And then I obviously went into the city of Manistee zoning ordinance and located all of the sections that would need to be appropriately amended for the new language that would need to go in, as well as looking at the existing wireless communication facilities language that's in there for the special use permits and what would need to be amended. And so what you have here in front of you is a brief overview, and then I have the new zoning amendment language, and it starts with amending Article 2, and I provide the definitions that would be needed. Moves into a small wireless facility. Definition is the last one. You'll see a little bit of text in red. That is an extra definition that I'm adding that speaks directly to them being placed in the right-of-way, that they need to be on utility poles that are 40 feet or less in height, and antennas cannot extend higher than 5 feet. And that comes from the legislation that the legislator put in place that's going to go into effect, I believe, the end of next month. Then Article 3, the district's dimensional standards use tables. This would need to be added to the use tables and be placed as a permitted use within all right-of-ways. Article 5, this would actually, and this is something Tamara and I found, we found in your special land use section. So you have your general provisions section, which are everything from landscaping, signage, lighting, is located within those sections. And you also have your special land use section, which is for special uses. I have, and this stems from MSU Extension, is why they do this stuff this way. I went to MSU, and I have a big issue with calling a section in ordinance a special uses section, because what happens is you immediately look at that section and you assume every single use that's listed in there is a special use in every single district. And when you go into your ordinance, it's not. You actually, retail is listed as a special use, because in your residential districts, it is a special use, but in all your commercial districts, it's not. So what I do when I write ordinances, I just finished 2, one for Coatmish Village and one for the Village of Bear Lake. I don't call them special land uses in the section. I call it specific use standards. That way it doesn't matter if it's a use by right or if it's a special use. If it is a use like a veterinary clinic where you wanna have special conditions so that you don't have, dogs and cats being boarded there, or if it's a convalescent home and you want to, regulate specifically hours of operation, who's allowed to go there, those type of things. It doesn't mean that that convalescent home has to be a special use within the district. It just means that it has additional standards for it, and it could still be a use by right, and that helps the developer, whoever's working through the ordinance, whether it's a zoning administrator or someone's trying to build, know that I just gotta meet these conditions and it's a use by right. And so, one thing I'm gonna probably come to you eventually is, let's change the name of that section. Let's go into your general provisions section, because you have a general provisions section, and I have to shove all this language in there for small cell wireless communications facilities, because they're not gonna be special uses. They can't be. Legislature said they can't. They gotta be a use by right. Well, we can't put them in a section that says special use, because they're not special uses. But the thing is, if you handed this to a utility company and asked them to go through it, they're not gonna know where the small cell wireless communications facilities are unless they ask the zoning administrator, or they go to, the glossary at the end of the ordinance. Whereas if it just said specific use standards, anything that's a use that's gonna have special standards would fall under there. Because right now, in your ordinance, in your general provisions, you have standards for some specific uses in the general provisions. And you would never know that they're there unless you read the ordinance on a day-to-day basis. And we caught a number of those things. There's veterinary clinic in there, there's a few things. And then there's like landscaping and lightage and sign, you know what I mean? It doesn't jive well, it doesn't flow. And so it's an argument I've been having with Kurt Schindler now for years. He doesn't agree with me, and I'm like, Kurt, you're wrong. But and just because I like the book, I get along with Kurt great, but I tried to, once I explained it to him, he was kind of like, oh, I see what you're doing, and I'm like, you know where that comes from? It comes from previous experience somewhere else. And so I'm like, everything doesn't have to follow conform to MSU land use education policy series, because it just doesn't. So I want to amend the ordinance with this language and stick it into general provisions so we have it in there so we meet the intent of the legislature, the legislation that's going to go into effect here. But eventually, I think we need to amend both of those sections just to make it simpler for anybody who's reading the ordinance or anybody who's amending the ordinance. But this is currently being, I assume, looked at by George Saylor right now, because this is my first stab at it. But I wanted you to have it as well, since I gave it to them this week. So we'll eventually be probably tackling this in about a month. I want to hear from George and make sure that he is comfortable with the verbiage in here and that everything is accurate and on the up and up before we actually go forward and have a public hearing, and then you make a recommendation to city council to adopt the amendment.
You know, you talked about these more antennas in an area. There is kind of an example down by the pump storage project on one of the
Yes.
consumer's tall towers.
Yes.
You don't see it unless you're looking at that tower.
Yes.
And
That's a good.
it's below the power lines, it's well below that height. But it is a huge cluster of cell things.
So it brings up a point, could they put them on transmission towers like we have running through in Maxwell Town?
Likely, yes.
But they'd
It
only go
says
to
it's
45 feet or 40 feet.
Yeah, 40 feet. And what it says is that if the utility pole is greater than 40 feet in height, it cannot be utilized. But they can replace the utility pole. So if it was say it was a 45-foot pole and they really wanted to put it there, they can replace that with a 40-foot pole, and then they can install them.
That's probably why they got those antennas. That's probably why they got those antennas lower on that tower at Ludington.
Yep. That's a really good example. That's like one of the only locations I've seen those co-located around here so far, though. That's
You get by that, and that's beautiful cell reception there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you're saying you can put them on
Those big, huge-
lower on the pole, if the pole's too high, they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to replace the pole, they just would put this unit.
Well, they can't. The legislation says you can't place them on a pole that's taller than 40 feet. So even if the pole is 45 feet, they can't use it. But the thing is, they can extend 5 feet above that 40 foot, so they could put it right at the top of a pole. But I think most utility poles are not greater than 40 feet in height. I think most of them are 30 feet.
I don't know.
But they wouldn't be
35,
able to
like-
use those big
Transmission towers.
transmission towers, they wouldn't be able to use.
That's right.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to use those. I'm talking like power line poles and that are in our yards and stuff like that is where they want to connect these things. And we're not saying, we don't know if they're gonna come do this in the city of Manistee, but the state legislature passed all this legislation. We've gotta conform the zoning to meet it now.
Is there public comment issues that we should be aware of, that where they've had these in other urban areas, that people are concerned or?
The biggest concern that I read in just doing some research online, and everything was in the Southwest. The Southwest is way ahead on this, out in California, Arizona and stuff. People weren't complaining about the actual units on the towers. There's base units that need for like the equipment on the ground, and they're allowed up to 28 cubic feet total. So it's like how we see those electrical boxes on corners. That's what they look like. And so you may have a big electrical box like that that holds all of the hardware for 20 antennas that are on different poles within that street area, that roadway. And then they'll have another box, and that'll connect to 20 antennas. So if you just look up, if you look on Google and look small cell wireless facilities, you'll see what they look like. They're round antennas, they're tall, tubular things, and there'll be a big box on the ground, like a electrical utility.
So
box.
Potentially, a homeowner could get a 20-foot box put right in front of their house on the public
Well,
right of way, next to their
28
telephone
cubic, they're allowed 28 cubic feet in space to fill, so that's
Which isn't very big.
like, that's not very big, it's like
No.
just over 5 by 5.
About that, yeah.
And that's what the law says, they have up to 28 cubic feet to fill.
Would be 28.
Yeah.
It's only in a public right of way, and it's gotta be used by right. I found all the sample, cause obviously, I didn't reinvent the wheel. I started searching sample ordinances here in the state and found some different things. I put a provision in here that I didn't see in anybody else's, but in dealing with writing zoning for wind turbines and stuff, obviously, I put a provision in there that they cannot have a company logo or emblem on any of the antennas or the boxes that's viewable to the public. Because otherwise, I could see this turning into an advertisement all over the place. And the next thing was they must be, what I have in here, they must be, all communications facilities should be designed to blend with the neighboring environment to the greatest extent possible. All communication facilities shall be of a color scheme which blends with the neighboring environment and/or is subdued in color. So that's what we did with wind turbines too. And we'll see if George lets that fly. I didn't find any other sample ordinances, so I was kind of concerned that, maybe you're not allowed to do this, but I couldn't find anything that told me I couldn't. It's not in the legislation, and I'm like, well, we might as well shoot for it and make them, paint them,
Sense.
subdued gray.
Although the
and-
AT&T boxes did have their AT&T.
Did they? Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of is big, Verizon or Sprint or.
Painted orange.
Painted orange, exactly, yep.
Acknowledgement on them, no, so people know what they are.
Well, they gotta have some kind of contact
Probably do.
on it somewhere.
Yeah, we do, but I mean.
Yeah, there have to be a contact down there,
Yeah.
certainly, yep.
Yeah,
That's why I put it as like logos, emblems, company name, I think is what
Yeah.
on there.
yeah,
And viewable to the public, so it could be on there somewhere, as long as it's not huge and
Right.
walking down the street and you're looking at a Verizon ad on every single pole.
yeah.
See a little 3x5 placard with the stuff on it or something like that, just enough where you gotta walk up to it to read it.
Exactly. I mean, Tamara brought up with the color scheme, like bright yellow for Sprint.
Yeah.
Maybe they put all those up and made them bright yellow, because that's their color that they use, or.
They
We don't want
changed everything. Yeah, that's the truth.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
this is just informational. I don't know if the language is legal yet. Once the legal beagle gets back to us, then I'll feel comfortable we can move forward. So,
Because
Thank you.
Some of the consumers' power boxes, depending where they're at, they'll paint them, the people will paint them to match the colors of their area, but not paint over where the identification emblem
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, we gotta, yeah.
Perfect.
So, I've seen a couple red buildings where the boxes are red and there's been blue boxes, right, where buildings are blue,
Oh, yeah.
so
So,
Yep,
it's
this is,
the building.
yep, perfect.
Oh, well, that makes sense, yeah.
uh-huh.
I think the language will allow for that.
Land,
too.
the owners of the building paint them that color.
Perfect.
Members' discussion, thank you for that, by the way, thank you. Member discussion, anybody have anything? Bob?
Nothing now.
Dick? Shelley? Roger?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything, so, make a move to adjourn.
I make a motion.
I make motion.
Second. Duly noted.
Aye, all opposed? All opposed?
Everyone?